Welcome to the next lecture in Intro to OT. This lecture will focus on content from Chapter 2 in the text. You should read that chapter before watching this lecture, and you may use the text as a reference as you watch. We learned in the last chapter that the profession of OT had its start in the psychiatric setting. But several events led to an expansion of the need for OTs and the eventual development of the OTA in response to those needs. In previous eras, including the Civil War, men went to battle, were injured, and they died on the battlefield. Or they were treated with crude surgery, sometimes worse than the injury, and died from that. With World War II and the medical advances that had occurred at that time, more men survived, but they had severe injuries that made recuperation long and return to home and work difficult. In addition, World War II saw the development of a new phenomenon called shell shock. Today we call it post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Men had psychological reactions to modern warfare, but were still needed to return to the front lines. It was at this time that the rehabilitation movement in general took hold. Trained personnel to treat physical and psychological problems were in high demand, and there were shortages of qualified professionals. In response to the shortage, many places used aides, assistants, or technicians to provide OT services. These assistants were then supervised, typically by one or two OTs. Often OTs were quite mobile in their employment, and assistants were relatively stable. This led to the assistant being an expert in the patients at a particular facility and experts on the activities and equipment in that setting. The assistants knew how to do things, but lacked the knowledge of the OTs. They could only work under immediate supervision. This is what led to the development of training programs for assistants. The idea was that if the assistants were able to be trained, then they could work more independently, seeing more patients and meeting more patients' needs. In other words, with a shorter, technically prepared training program, more personnel could be developed to increase the workforce and distribute the caseloads. The top 4 OTA advocates. The development of an occupational therapy assistant was controversial. Many OTs were afraid of what this might mean for them. Colonel Ruth Robinson was an advocate for the training of supportive OT personnel. She saw her greatest accomplishment as president of the AOTA was the development of programs and curriculum for the training of OTAs. During her presidency, there were many discussions and much controversy about the development of the OTA role, but the proposal was finally adopted by the AOTA in 1957. We generally consider this the start of the OTA role. Marion Crampton was initially involved in training supportive OT personnel in Massachusetts prior to the adoption of an OTA proposal. She was the chair of the AOTA's Committee on Occupational Therapy Assistants and was instrumental in the recognition of OTAs. Mildred Schwagmeyer was the Director of Technical Education. During her time in this position, training programs moved from hospital-based to academic-based training. She also led workshops, which eventually led to specification of the role and function of the OTA, outlined the COTA-OTR relationships, and led to the development of the Guide for Supervision of Occupational Therapy Personnel. We will look at this document later in this course and in other courses. Finally, Youth Brunyett Weimer was president of the AOTA from 1964 to 1967. This was a time of great conflict in the organization and change in the world of healthcare. In the 60s, Medicare was established, which led to the rapid development of nursing homes and home health agencies. OT was a small, unrecognized profession. For professional OTs, OTAs were an additional source of turmoil. There was a lack of nationwide consensus on the role of the OT, much less the role of the OTA. Weimer led the AOTA through this, and eventually OT was one of the first professions that had the vision to establish a sub-professional group. For comparison, OTA was established in 1957, physician's assistants established in 1965, and physical therapy assistants in 1968. The development of the OTA is a long and involved process, as outlined in the text in the timeline provided on page 23. I would suggest you just review that. You don't have to memorize each part of those, but as you read the chapter, think about how all of those things fit together. AOTAs continue to evolve today. OTAs filled an essential patient need at a time when there were insufficient numbers of OTs to meet this need. There's still work to be done for equal representation of COTAs in professional organizations, but many improvements have been made. Today, OTAs are not limited to traditional practice areas. They have many unique career opportunities available to them. A final point. It's very important to get clear what the different OT terms mean. You have to use them accurately. So let's read through this. The term OT practitioner, and we will use this often, refers to all OTs, OTAs, and OTAs. It is a mistake and a misrepresentation to call yourself simply an OT. This means the OTR. That's a master's level program. When you successfully complete this program, the OTA program, you have the title OTA. When you pass the national exam, you become a certified occupational therapy assistant. But the whole group of us practicing in this profession are called OT practitioners. I have the title of OTR, or Registered Occupational Therapist. As a student, your title is OTAS, or Occupational Therapy Assistant Student. That concludes this lecture. You will go back to Blackboard to watch the videos located in the link titled Yesterday and Today, video clips. That is your next section.